Something inside 3I Atlas is pushing asteroids away. Not drifting past them, not grazing them, pushing them. As if a perfectly smooth, perfectly stable field surrounds it, a geometric shell no natural object should produce. We first saw it on high-velocity interferometric scans normally used for gravitational wave mapping, and the room went silent. Natural objects don't behave like this. This isn't noise, it isn't an artifact, it isn't a glitch. And if this sounds like 3I Atlas is protected by something that has no right to exist in nature, you're not alone. Stay with me. It only gets worse from here. I don't remember when I stopped blinking. Hours, maybe? Could have been days. Time had begun to feel like a fabric stretched too tight, one tug away from ripping straight through. But that first moment, the moment everything changed, happened at 2:46 a.m., when the lab was so quiet I could hear the coolant pumps of the QGI rig breathing through the floor. There was a shadow inside 3I Atlas. A stable, geometric void. A shape that shouldn't exist inside a natural object. Symmetrical where comets should be chaotic. Sharp-edged where ice should scatter light. And I watched it persist frame after frame inside the quantum gravimetric scan like a bruise deep inside the nucleus. Every instinct screamed artifact, noise, software glitch, anything but what it looked like. But noise doesn't hold its shape. Noise doesn't cast a gravitational contour. And the contour, God help me, the contour moved. If you're listening to this right now, stay with me. Because what we saw next would rewrite everything we thought we knew about interstellar objects, and maybe about gravity itself. Some of you have followed my earlier breakdown of the 3I Atlas mass anomaly, but this is what happened after, when the anomaly became an impossibility. When an object from another star system did something natural objects do not do. I promise you, the story gets stranger, much stranger. But before we go there, let me take you back to the beginning. Back to the night I realized Atlas wasn't just heavier than it should be. It was hollow and full of something that reacted to gravity in a way nothing should. The first ping came through the Deep Space Mass Lensing Array at White Sands, a prototype we weren't even supposed to use without clearance. It's a system designed to detect faint curvature, microscopic distortions in spacetime caused by small, fast-moving bodies. Comets, asteroids, interstellar debris, but not shadows, not voids. When the alert flashed across my terminal, the interface pulsed a warning red I'd never seen before. Unresolved mass signature anisotropic lensing detected. Object 3I Atlas. I exhaled sharply, cold rushing up my spine. Atlas wasn't acting like a comet. It wasn't behaving like anything natural. The quantum gravimetric interferometer, QGI, was still running its second pass, firing entangled photon pairs across the feed to measure ultra-small deviations in gravitational potential. These readings were supposed to be boring, predictable, a tired calibration exercise for a system too sensitive for ordinary use. Instead, the signal from the heart of Atlas pulsed with a rhythm, not biological, not mechanical, more like oscillation. A standing wave. Something inside was shaping the gravitational field, keeping a stable, repeating geometry no comet should produce. I leaned closer to the screen, pulse in my throat. No, I whispered, because the alternative was to think yes. Behind me, one of the servers clicked, a metallic sigh in the dead air. I zoomed in. The shadow sharpened. And that's when I saw it, when the breath left my body in a cold, hollow collapse. The shadow was moving. Not randomly, not dissolving, sliding like a weight shifting inside. a geometric object inside a comet-sized block of ice, something with mass and not mass, something that gravity bent around differently than around everything else. That was the moment my hands shook badly enough to knock over my coffee. But even that wasn't the worst part. The worst came when I overlaid the new data with the previous 3 nights of readings. The signature inside 3i Atlas wasn't just present, it was consistent, repeating, perfectly synchronized with the nucleus rotation every 7.11 hours. Natural objects don't do synchronized. Nature is chaos dressed in probabilities. This was precision. Too much precision. I sat back, heart pounding in my ears. I wanted to call someone, anyone. But I knew what would happen. Reports meant committees, committees meant delays, and delays, well, delays meant losing the window. Atlas was already outbound, already slipping past Jupiter's orbit, already dimming. We had hours, maybe less. One mistake and the data would vanish with it. The shadow pulsed again on the screen, and that's when the second alert struck like a hammer blow. QGI event flagged. Non-Newtonian gravitational response detected. Object interaction predicted in 18 minutes. I froze. Interaction? With what? The feed updated. A small asteroid, cataloged as 2001 RJ-135, was drifting across Atlas's projected path. Close approach, 0.09 AU, practically a kiss by astronomical standards. 90,000 miles. Too far for collision, too far for tidal disruption, they'd pass each other like 2 ships in a dark ocean. But the QGI model was predicting something else. A gravitational disturbance. A response. Atlas was going to do something. I remember standing slowly, my knees stiff, as if the air had grown thick around me. I remember hearing my own heartbeat louder than the hum of the equipment. Objects don't react to small asteroids. Objects don't respond. Objects don't anticipate. I pulled up the simulation, and for the first time in my life, I saw a line on a model that made no sense. As the asteroid and Atlas approached their closest distance, Atlas's gravitational signature compressed like a fist tightening. Then it expanded in a wave-like distortion that pushed outward. A repulsion. A gravitational recoil. I blinked once, twice, harder. Impossible. Absolutely, physically impossible. There was no mechanism for this, no known physics, no interaction, no mass sufficient to create a detectable repulsive signature. Not even theoretical frameworks gave you repulsion at this scale. But the model was unwavering. Atlas would push the asteroid. Slightly. Barely. A whisper of force. But measurable. And then the time hit 0. The feed rolled in. White Sands confirmed first, then Los Alamos, then Fermilab's DSN station, 3 independent facilities, 3 separate instruments. Same result. Asteroid 2001 RJ-135 changed its trajectory. Not by much, not dramatically, but enough to be certain. The asteroid should have continued straight along its path. Instead, it veered, microscopically, away from Atlas. A tiny nudge, a flick of the wrist, repulsion. I stared at the numbers, the graphs, the space-time curvature plots, shifting in ways they shouldn't. My throat tightened as the reality sunk in. Atlas had passed through the asteroid's predicted gravitational well, untouched, unscathed, like it was slipping between threads of gravity, as if matter wasn't completely solid to it, as if the rules didn't apply. My mind raced in spirals. Was it shielding? Interstellar erosion? Unknown composition? Dark matter admixture? An internal mass field oscillation? A gravitational phase mismatch? Nothing fit, nothing came close. That's the thing they never tell you in physics. The real fear isn't when things are loud, dramatic, immediate. The real fear comes when something quiet refuses to fit into a box. Because then you realize there is no box. I forced myself to breathe, slow and steady, grounding myself in the chair. I replayed the gravitational data overlay at half speed, then at quarter speed. Atlas didn't collide with the asteroid's predicted gravitational well. It slid through it. Matter shouldn't slide through matter. Gravity shouldn't slide through gravity. Unless... I sat up. Hard. The shadow. The geometric void. The internal oscillation.
Something inside Atlas was creating a field, subtle, controlled, and unbelievably precise, that altered its interaction with external mass. A foreign physics. A physics we had no vocabulary for. Light flickered across my screen again. Another update. New anomaly detected. Asteroid spin rate altered. Source: 3i/Atlas interaction. I whispered into the empty room. Oh God, it didn't just repel it. The realization struck like a physical blow. It rotated it. Only a few degrees, a fraction of a fraction, but the torque was there. A fingertip touch from something that shouldn't have hands. Something alive? Something engineered? Something responsive? No. No. I shoved that thought back into the dark corners of my mind. Speculation was a trap. We needed data. But data was already painting its own picture. Atlas wasn't just heavier, wasn't just fragmented, wasn't just gravitationally anomalous. It was interacting with objects around it. And then the final alert hit. The QGI array detected a secondary oscillation, a kind of echo inside Atlas, a rising harmonic, like something responding internally to the asteroid encounter, adjusting, recalibrating, or waking up. The waveform climbed steadily, soft, smooth, deliberate, not random, not natural. I felt myself swallow, mouth dry. "Why are you doing this?" I whispered. The answer came in data, not words. A final pulse from Atlas, stronger than before, radiated outward in a delicate ring. It washed past the asteroid remnants, past the dust fields, past us. 9 seconds later, every gravimetric sensor on the North American network registered the same impossible reading. Transient space-time reduction event localized to 3i Atlas. Duration, 0.14 seconds. Space got thinner. Reality flexed, and Atlas kept moving as if nothing had happened. My heart hammered at the cage of my ribs. The calculus had changed. The stakes had changed. The nature of Atlas had changed. We weren't looking at a comet. We were looking at something that could manipulate gravity, not break it, not override it, but dance with it in a way we didn't understand. Something capable of slipping through gravitational wells like a blade through cloth. And if it could do that, what else could it pass through? What else could it push? I closed my eyes. This wasn't a survey anymore. It wasn't observation. It wasn't science in the usual sense. It was a message. Not one we received intentionally, but one we could no longer unsee. 3i Atlas wasn't avoiding collisions. It wasn't obeying celestial mechanics. It was choosing its path. The shadow pulsed a final time on my screen. Symmetry sharpening, edges crisping, as if responding to the encounter. And I felt it. Not belief, not speculation, certainty. Something inside Atlas was aware of its surroundings.
Not conscious, not necessarily, but adaptive, reactive, deliberate. The air in the lab felt suddenly too thin. Because if Atlas could pass through asteroids, if it could repel them, if it could manipulate its gravitational footprint on command, then either the physics we know is incomplete, or something inside Atlas was built.
And then the lab lights flickered. The QGI feed froze. A warning tone screamed through the console. And the last frame before the system crashed showed the shadow inside Atlas expanding, as if it had noticed us, as if it was looking back. I didn't realize I'd stopped breathing until the lab fell dark. The monitors flickered, the overhead LEDs buzzed, and for a moment, an impossibly long moment, the world became a negative, black outlines on ghost-white air. I stood there in the half-dead room with the hum of machinery fading like a pulse slipping into silence. The QGI array was down, and the last frozen image on the screen before everything collapsed showed the shadow inside 3i Atlas expanding, like a heartbeat caught mid-pulse. I gripped the console edge. I felt the cold steel dig into my palms. The rational part of my mind tried to explain the blackout. Power glitch, server cascade, automated update. But deep inside, in a place I didn't want to acknowledge, another thought whispered, "It saw you." No. Impossible. It was coincidence. Pattern recognition in a stressed brain. I could fix this. Reboot the rig, reroute the array, bring the readings back before the data window closed for good. I hit the emergency restoration key. Twice. Nothing. The backup terminal glowed weakly, then dimmed again. And finally, after a few agonizing seconds, the emergency red strip lights came online, bathing the lab in a dull crimson. The shadows looked too deep, too sharp. I opened the system log with shaking fingers. QGI failure mode. Unknown. Primary array locked. Error code 44C. Ascension. What the hell did that mean? It wasn't a real code, not from any table, not from any firmware revision. Someone or something had overridden the diagnostics. My chest tightened. I pulled up the isolated QGI kernel, the one that couldn't be externally accessed, not even by the network admins. It was corrupted. Not scrambled, not erased. Corrupted with structure. Geometric structure. Fractalized, recursive, patterned down to the bit level. Something had overwritten the low-level instructions with repeating geometry. Nested hexagonal lattices like gravitational tessellations encoded in digital form. My heartbeat started climbing, climbing, climbing. A chime sounded behind me. Not an alarm, a notification. My phone buzzed on the corner of the desk. Unknown caller. No ID, no traceable metadata, no origin. Every flag I had buried deep in my paranoia flared at once. I hesitated, thumb hovering, and answered. There was no voice, just breathing, steady, controlled, mechanical in its calmness, a silence long enough to fill the entire room. Then, faintly, a woman's voice broke through, filtered, distorted, as if pushed through crushed glass. Do not reboot the array. My stomach dropped through the floor. Who is this? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. You need to listen, the voice continued, as if I hadn't spoken. Atlas is reacting to observation. A coldness slid down my spine. How do you know that? There was a pause. The breathing stopped. Silence stretched so thin it crackled. It reacted to us,
she said finally. 43 minutes before it reacted to you. I swallowed, my throat suddenly tight. Who is us? Another pause. Longer. Heavier. Then, we saw Atlas pass through something much larger than your asteroid. My skin prickled. What did it pass through? When she answered, her tone was measured, as if speaking the words carefully so they wouldn't tear something open. A Jovian moon. I gripped the desk, heart pounding. What? That's impossible. Which moon? When? A slight breath. Then, you already know. My knees went weak. Europa. The unexpected seismic event 3 days ago. The anomaly NASA brushed off as internal cryovolcanic stress. The readings that didn't match any known model of subsurface ice fracturing. The timing matched perfectly. No, I whispered. You're saying Atlas passed through Europa, she finished for me.
Without slowing, without impact, without leaving a collision signature on the orbital debris radar. But that's, my breath caught, that's not physics. No, she said softly, it's not. I pressed my palm to my forehead, trying to force the room into focus. Who are you? I demanded. Are you with NASA, JPL, ESA, White Sands? Who the hell am I talking to? The voice lowered, like she was leaning closer. You're not cleared for that. I almost laughed. Almost. The kind of laughter that only happens when the world stops making sense and the ground beneath you turns to vapor. And why the hell did you call me? Because, she said, you're the only one who has seen what we saw. My mind raced. The QGI data, the geometric void, the gravitational repulsion, the space-time thinning event. Call is ending, the voice said abruptly. You have one job now. Her tone sharpened, cutting through the static, through me. Do not assume you're observing a passive object. Atlas is responding to the gravitational environment, and it's escalating. Click. Silence. The line died. I stared at the phone screen, breath shallow. Then I snapped into motion, moving fast, driven by instinct more than logic. I pulled up the emergency offline storage vault, accessed the redundant QGI telemetry, cross-referenced with DSMLA gravitational lensing data. Then I froze. A new data set had appeared, time-stamped exactly 1 minute after the blackout. QGI primary array single-frame recovery. Source: unknown subroutine. Authorization: not recognized. Payload: 1 file. My hands trembled as I opened it. It was a frame. 1 image. Gravimetric. Ultra-high resolution. And it wasn't from the moment before the blackout. It was from moments after. I leaned closer, breath catching. Atlas wasn't just expanding its internal shadow. It was emitting a faint halo, thin, structured, fractal around the perimeter of the nucleus, a gravitational skin, a sheath of altered curvature. And inside the core, the geometric object was no longer still. It had rotated, not randomly, precisely, deliberately, aligned at a new angle relative to Atlas's direction of motion, like a compass needle adjusting. I stared at the frame until my eyes burned. What are you doing? I whispered. My terminal dinged. Another alert. DSMLA update. Asteroid 311 Pan. Size 13 meters. Predicted close pass with 3i Atlas, 94,000 kilometers. Observed close pass, 62 kilometers. Result: Atlas trajectory remains unchanged. Asteroid spin altered. I whispered, 62 kilometers. That's nothing. Atlas had allowed an object to come close, insanely close, and then it had spun it, like a finger brushing a basketball. A different thought crept into my mind, not a pleasant one. It was testing force application, repulsion, rotation, trajectory alteration, gravitational phasing, testing them all. And then my heart stopped. Another message appeared. An automated transmission from the QGI's reflection mapping subsystem. Text only. Plain, simple, impossible. Incoming field response detected. Pattern matches internal oscillation of Atlas. Vector directed toward observer, Earth. I felt the cold settle into my bones. Atlas had sent something back. Not a signal, not information. A gravitational reflection, a subtle pulse, a whisper in space-time directed unmistakably toward us, toward the observers, toward me. I recoiled from the console, then forced myself back, leaning in so close my breath fogged the tempered screen. "What are you doing?" I whispered. The light lab flickered, and then the QGI system, half functional, half fried, produced a sound it was not designed to produce. A low hum, not mechanical, not digital, a resonance. The harmonic signature of Atlas, the same pattern from the core, transposed into vibration, into something my ears could feel more than hear. It crawled into my chest, into my teeth, into the hollow space behind my ribs. I gripped the desk to steady myself. The resonance grew. The shadow inside Atlas rotated again on the display. And then the QGI system forced out one last garbled frame. One more image. Not complete, not calibrated, but clear enough. The internal object, the geometric mass, had unfolded. Not physically, gravitationally, like a dimensional flower opening its petals. A lattice structure expanding, branching into symmetries that defy Euclidean intuition. And in the center, something like an eye. A focal point, a convergence zone. Not biological, not conscious, but aware in a way physics doesn't have a word for. The resonance hit a peak. My vision blurred. My ears rang. The emergency lights dimmed. And the QGI array shut down entirely. Silence swallowed the lab. I stood there, chest heaving, sweat cold across my spine. Every instinct screamed to leave, to run, to tell someone, to screen fire and anomaly and threat. But then the phone buzzed again. Same unknown number, same blank metadata. My hand trembled as I answered. This time the woman didn't wait. "Did you see it?" I swallowed. Yes. Her breath hitched, so soft I almost missed it. "Then you understand," she said. "Atlas isn't avoiding matter." My pulse hammered. It's selecting interactions, testing forces, learning how different gravitational environments respond to its field. My breath caught. "Learning," I echoed. "Yes." Her voice tightened. "And if we are right, if it continues through the asteroid belt, then the next phase will be inevitable." I braced myself. "What phase?" Silence. Then, penetration. The word hit me like a slap. "What does that mean?" I whispered. Another breath. Another pause. And then, "It means Atlas is no longer content passing through small objects." The next words came slowly, as if she hated saying them. "It's moving toward something large." A cold knot formed in my stomach. Large? Like what? When she spoke, her voice cracked. Like Ceres. My blood ran cold. Ceres wasn't a rock. It was a dwarf planet, 900 kilometers wide, a mass of ice, rock, salts, and ancient subsurface reservoirs, a body with enough gravity to tear a comet apart. Unless gravity didn't apply.
unless Atlas was slipping through it the way it slipped through asteroids. And if it did, the implications were catastrophic. Not because Ceres would be destroyed, but because the rules of collision, mass, density, and gravitational boundaries would break on a scale visible across the entire solar system. A cosmic demonstration, a proof, a message. My voice shook. When will it reach Ceres? Her answer came like a death sentence. 37 hours. My knees buckled. 37 hours until Atlas attempted to pass through a dwarf planet. 37 hours until the solar system witnessed physics tear along seams we didn't know existed. 37 hours until we learned definitively whether the laws of our universe were merely suggestions to the thing inside Atlas. I forced out the question that terrified me most. What happens if it succeeds? Her silence told me everything. Finally, she said, then we're dealing with something that moves through matter as if matter were optional. And if it fails? I whispered. She exhaled, slow, trembling.
Then we find out what happens when an unstoppable anomaly meets 900 kilometers of planetary mass. A chill laced through my bones. What do you want me to do? I asked. Her answer came quickly. Prepare. For what? For the possibility, she said, that we have been watching a probe performing gravitational diagnostics. My heart surged. No, I breathed. You're saying... I'm saying, she interrupted, that we may no longer be the observers. The call ended. The lab was silent except for my shaking breath. I looked back at the dead QGI rig, at the frozen image of the unfolding geometric core, at the faint gravitational halo encircling Atlas like a chrysalis. 37 hours. 37 hours until the solar system changed. I reached for the console, and as I touched it, the last bit of metadata from the recovered frame scrolled across the screen. Lines of code I hadn't noticed, hidden in the corner. Time-stamped at the moment the shadow unfolded. It wasn't system output. It wasn't machine-generated. It was text. Readable. Plain. Just 3 words. Burn this path. My breath caught. The message wasn't from the QGI. It was embedded in the gravitational signal. Something inside Atlas had written it, and it was not done writing. I didn't sleep. I don't think I even sat down. I just stood there in the red-lit lab, the kind of cold silence that makes you feel like the walls are breathing. 37 hours. 37 hours until something impossible collided, or didn't collide, with Ceres. My mind kept replaying the last thing the unknown woman said. Atlas is no longer passive. You don't forget words like that. Not when you've seen the shadow inside the core unfolding like it was testing the limits of geometry. Not when the QGI rig stops obeying basic physics. Not when a gravitational signal writes coherent text. Burn this path. I stared at that message long enough that the letters began to blur, black streaks against the dying diagnostics. I needed a second opinion, a keem, a government, a committee, a priest, something, someone. Instead, I had the hum of cooling fans and a heartbeat that wouldn't settle. Enough. I forced myself awake, slapped water on my face in the lab sink, and sat down. If Atlas was headed towards Ceres, there'd be traces in every deep space system we had. Optical, radar, mass lensing, thermal. I could cross-reference it all, build a composite, predict, if the universe was feeling generous, what the hell it intended to do next. I began pulling data. NASA's NEO tracking logs first, then ESA's Hera telemetry, then DeepSync's civilian gravimetric cluster, an AI-run distributed network that monitored micro-lensing anomalies in real time.
3 systems froze mid-download. That never happens. Then one by one the feeds started streaming again, except they weren't showing raw telemetry anymore. They were showing a window, a literal visual window, a rectangular opening in space, blacker than vacuum, too sharp, too perfect, hanging out there just ahead of Atlas, 30 or 40,000 miles from its current position. I blinked hard, checked the timestamps, checked the sources. All 3 networks, independent, isolated, were seeing it. A geometric shape in space where there shouldn't be one. Not a shadow, not lens distortion, not an imaging artifact. A hole, a door, a threshold. The kind of thing that makes even seasoned astrophysicists feel like children standing outside a locked basement, hearing noises they don't understand. "What are you doing?" I whispered, tracing the edge of the shape on the screen with my finger. It didn't look like anything natural. Not lensing from a massive object, not an Einstein ring, not gravitational shear. The geometry was too crisp. A vertical slit with parallel sides, like someone had cut reality with a razor. Then the update hit. QGI reflection map, new field response. Origin, 3I/Atlas. Signature match, 94% to internal shadow. Vector, pointing directly at window. My breath caught. Atlas was reacting to the window, or to whatever that thing was. And the field signature inside the comet matched the geometry of the hole ahead of it, like puzzle pieces, like matched frequencies, like a T approaching a lock. The air in the lab felt suddenly thinner, as if Atlas being millions of miles away wasn't enough distance, as if the room itself was shrinking around me. I zoomed in. The edges of the window pulsed faintly, like a membrane stretched across dimensions, vibrating with the same harmonic frequency the QGI had detected inside Atlas. It was aligning, preparing, like it had done this before. My phone vibrated again. Same number. My hand flinched so hard the chair slid backward. I didn't hesitate this time. I answered. "You're seeing the aperture," she said, without introduction. Aperture. Her tone was different now. Strained. Not calm. Not controlled. This time she sounded like someone who hadn't slept in days. "You need to tell me what this is," I said, my voice cracked. "What am I looking at?" "You're looking at what Atlas does before a penetration event." The room spun slightly. "You said penetration meant passing through solid matter, like Europa, but this is a window," she said. "A boundary field, an anchoring plane, whatever you want to call it. We don't have terminology for it." Her breath trembled, almost imperceptibly. "But the important thing," she continued, "is that Atlas isn't creating it." I froze. "What?" "The aperture precedes Atlas," she said. "Every time. There were more events. More than Europa. More than the asteroid we saw. More than the mass anomalies." "How do you know that?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "We've tracked it. Classified missions. Deep gravimetric archives. Unreported encounters with minor bodies. Atlas doesn't break objects. It phases through. The aperture manifests ahead of it minutes, hours, sometimes days before impact." "It's predictive?" I asked, swallowing hard. "No," she said. "It's pre-configured. Atlas is following it." Her voice tightened, like she wasn't supposed to say this. "It's not navigating on its own." My pulse skipped. "It's following instructions?" Something twisted inside my chest, hard. "You said this thing might be a probe?" "Not might," she corrected softly. "Almost certainly." The screens flickered again, as if reacting to her words. Atlas's trajectory overlay updated. A new curve, a gentle, deliberate bend, bringing it closer to the window. "So why the aperture?" I asked. Why open what? A passage? A shield? A slipstream? The aperture is how it manipulates matter, she said. It reconfigures gravitational potential, creates a zone where the normal rules don't apply. That's why it passes through asteroids, through ice, through rock. And through Europa, I said quietly. She didn't respond. I rubbed my forehead, fingers cold against my skin. If the aperture has appeared ahead of Atlas before other interactions, why hasn't anyone said anything? Why are these events hidden? You know why, she said. Not angry, not sharp, just tired. Because if the public knew something non-natural was moving through the solar system, following gravitational corridors we don't understand, the world would panic. I finished. Yes. The aperture pulsed again. Brighter, more defined. The harmonic frequencies between Atlas's internal mass and the window began to synchronize. That's when the screen flashed white. A burst, not of light, of curvature. A gravitational shock wave. It was small, barely measurable, but sharp enough that the QGI sensors sputtered back to life for a second, screaming with data, before collapsing. I grabbed the desk to keep from falling. How close are they? I asked. Atlas will reach the aperture in under 4 hours. 4 hours until the first phase of whatever this thing was. 4 hours until Atlas interacted with something we didn't even understand enough to fear properly. I pulled the data feeds again, this time from the DSMLA's real-time curvature solver. The wavefront from the aperture was spreading not like energy, but like a rearrangement of local gravitational topology. Space itself was being softened, molded, like the window was reshaping reality ahead of itself. Then the alarm blared. A piercing sound, one I'd never heard before. The DSMLA system pushed a full-spectrum warning across every active interface. Gravitational lensing spike source, aperture magnitude, extreme. Effect, minor body deflection detected. I stared at the real-time feed, not believing what I saw. A small asteroid, designated KX-211, drifted near the aperture's influence zone. Then, it snapped. Not exploded, not shattered, snapped out of its trajectory like someone flicked it with a finger. It rotated, spiraling as if repelled by something invisible. "This is new?" the woman whispered through the phone, her voice barely audible. "We've never seen an aperture interact at this range." I felt a tremor in my bones. Not physical, psychological. The kind that comes when your understanding of nature breaks and something else takes its place, cold and dark. "What is it doing?" "We don't know," she said, "but whatever the aperture is, it's active now, and Atlas is accelerating toward it." She paused. "Which means the penetration event may not be with Ceres." My stomach twisted. "What do you mean?" She inhaled sharply. "Check the new trajectory." I loaded the trajectory solver, fingers stiff. The path updated. Atlas was no longer on a direct line toward Ceres. It was bending, curving, adjusting toward a denser region of the asteroid belt, a cluster with 40-plus bodies. "Oh, God," I breathed. "It's going into the field." "Yes," she whispered, "it's going into the cluster." I tried to keep my hand steady as I zoomed in. The aperture's influence zone overlapped with the densest part of the field. Atlas's speed was increasing, not enough for a comet, but too controlled, too smooth for randomness. The aperture pulsed again. The field around it shimmered faintly, as if dust and microfractures in space-time were catching the harmonic. Atlas's internal shadow rotated again, aligning perfectly with the aperture, like a lock clicking into position. "This isn't a phase," she whispered. "This isn't a test." "Then what is it?" I asked, my voice cracking. "It's preparation," she said. "For what?" "For the crossing." Crossing. I felt my pulse heat in my throat. Atlas wasn't approaching Ceres to pass through it. It was heading toward the densest gravitational environment accessible without changing orbits, the cluster, a region filled with dozens of rocks, targets, objects. What is it crossing into?
I asked. Her silence was all the answer I needed. Something was on the other side of that aperture. Something Atlas needed to reach. The asteroid belt wasn't the destination. Sarah's wasn't the target. They were obstacles, steps, calibration points. I leaned closer to the screen, watching the curve of Atlas's path tighten, as if threading itself toward the aperture like a needle through fabric. I need to know what happened when it passed through Europa, I whispered. She exhaled shakily. Europa didn't break, didn't fracture, didn't even notice at the macroscopic level. But the seismic readouts, those weren't fractures, she said. They were echoes. Echoes of what? Of Atlas, she whispered. Echoes of its gravitational imprint reflecting through the moon's internal ocean. A signature. A wake. I swallowed. So if it passes through a dense asteroid field, it will leave imprints in every object it crosses, she said. Microscale warps in curvature, resonant patterns that travel through mass. I felt cold, colder than I'd felt in my life. And if the aperture grows, I began. It will, she said immediately. Then, I asked, then Atlas won't just pass through objects. It will travel somewhere else entirely. My breath caught. Please tell me you're not implying this aperture is a... Don't say it, she snapped, suddenly harsh. We both knew the word. Portal. Gate. Passage. A crossing point, but neither of us dared speak it. The truth felt too big, too intrusive, like the universe was listening. The alarms on the DSMLA feed softened to a steady pulse. Warning, tracking, updating. The aperture grew, Atlas accelerated. The gravitational harmonics between them intensified. The first probe-like oscillation hit, not from Atlas, from the aperture. A ripple of curvature that shouldn't exist in standard physics. A new mode, a new harmonic. Do you see that? I whispered. The woman gasped. Oh my God, she breathed. It's responding to Atlas. Meaning the aperture is aware of the probe approaching. My skin prickled. You said it wasn't artificial. We don't know what it is, she said, but Atlas isn't making that aperture. Something else is. I stared at the screens. The aperture brightened. Atlas's shadow unfolded deeper, and for the first time I understood something I hadn't before. The message embedded in the signal. Burn this path. It wasn't a warning. It was a directive, a line of instruction, a navigation command. So Atlas isn't choosing the path, I whispered. No, she said. It's executing it. A shiver climbed up my spine. Are we intercepting its software? Its operating instructions? Its navigation protocol? Something like that, she said, but not digital, not electronic, something gravitational. Something encoded in mass itself. Encoded in mass. Not signal, not light, mass. My head spun. Then the DSMLA issued its deepest alert yet, a full spectrum cascade. Aperture expansion event. Size increase 480%. New dimensions 63 kilometers high by 14 kilometers wide. Gravitational duality signature detected. Duality signature. The word alone chilled me. Because duality in gravitational terms means one thing. Two overlapping curvatures occupying the same spatial coordinates. Two realities sharing a seam. I staggered back from the console. What does duality mean in this context? I asked. It means, she whispered, the aperture isn't opening into space. I felt my pulse hammer. It's opening somewhere. The last layer of denial peeled away. This wasn't a comet, this wasn't an anomaly, this wasn't a natural object drifting through our system. This was something operating on physics that made our understanding feel like stone tools. Atlas reached the threshold distance. 2 hours left, maybe less. Then I saw something on the telemetry I hadn't expected. A second aperture. Smaller. Dimmer. Behind Atlas. What is that? I breathed. Her inhale was sharp. Oh my God, she whispered. It's a stabilizer. A what? A stabilizing plane, she said. A counterfield. A mass anchor. Something to keep the probe aligned during crossing. Crossing where? I asked again, voice shaking. She inhaled sharply. The last time we saw a dual aperture configuration was in deep archives from before Atlas entered our system. What object was it? I whispered. Not an object, she said. A region. A pause. Then, near Proxima. A zone we can't map. We only know Atlas came out of it. I felt everything inside me twist into a single question. What is on the other side? Her voice cracked for the first time. We don't know. The aperture flared. Atlas accelerated. And I understood with a clarity that felt like a blade pressed against the back of my neck. The probe wasn't here to study our system. It was here to cross through it, using our gravity wells, our mass distribution, our star. It was using the solar system as a stepping stone, because something had given it instructions, and the next step was the asteroid belt. A warning flashed, bright red. Atlas Field Harmonic Breakthrough. New frequency band detected. Type, communication-like. Not cause, not effect. Communication. The first message embedded in the signal was a command. Burn this path. The new one loaded slowly, resolving layer by layer across the screen. 3 words. Not code, not binary. Plain. Simple. Directed at us. Do not follow. The lab fell silent, and in that silence I realized something else. Atlas wasn't warning us. It wasn't threatening us. It was telling us the truth. Where it was going, we couldn't survive the trip. The hours that followed felt like standing inside a collapsing timeline. Every minute compressed. Every breath carried weight. Every new piece of data tightened something in my chest until I could barely inhale. Atlas was accelerating toward the aperture. The aperture was expanding. And the second aperture, the stabilizing plane, was growing behind Atlas like a trailing shadow, the kind that moved even when its source didn't. Time was running like falling objects run. Fast, inevitable, unforgiving. 2 hours, then 90 minutes, then 78. I could hear the hum of the backup QGI system as it limped back online, coughing out intermittent packets of readings. The lab felt smaller and darker, even though the emergency lights were still burning their sick red glow into the walls. I kept replaying the last message the gravitational signature gave us. Do not follow.
But direction, something between command and caution, a boundary written into physics. Like the probe was telling us, you cannot come where I'm going. You're not built for it. The thought refused to leave me. But I didn't have time to think about what lay on the far side. All I had was the approaching event, the moment Atlas reached the densest part of the asteroid belt. My screen lit up with a new alert. DSMLA real-time update. Multiple minor body alterations detected. Distance to aperture, 6.4 million km. Distance to Atlas, 1.9 million km. It was happening faster now, like the inner solar system had begun turning pages in a book far too quickly. I pulled the curvature map, zoomed in, stopped breathing. The aperture wasn't a slit anymore. It had sprawled into a long, vertical band of distortion, almost like someone had taken a strip of black fabric and stretched it across the void. Dust, rock, microdebris bent around it like water around a keel. The edges rippled with harmonic waves. I leaned closer to the monitor. My eyes caught on something. I froze. There were shapes inside the aperture, not objects, not silhouettes, patterns, repeating latticework structures blinking in and out of alignment like interference on a broken screen. They reminded me of the geometric mass inside Atlas, the shadow core, but larger, more complex, as if the aperture was reflecting something beyond it, something bigger. I pulled the data, ran a spectral overlay. The result hit me like a sledgehammer. The aperture's pattern matched the internal geometry of Atlas with a correlation of 99%. Not similar, not analogous, identical. Like the window was designed for the probe, made for it, waiting for it. The phone buzzed again. Same number, same breathless silence before a voice finally broke through. "You're seeing the reflection patterns," she said, no introduction needed. "What is this?" I asked. "What's inside the aperture?" She hesitated. Her silence was louder than an alarm. "Tell me," I said through clenched teeth. "I'm already in. Just say it." "Not what's inside," she whispered. "What's beyond?" I felt my pulse thud in my ears. "You're implying this is a threshold," I said. "A literal crossing point into—" "Another gravitational domain," she finished for me. "Another region of space-time. Possibly another frame of curvature entirely." I shut my eyes, felt the floor tilt beneath me. "Something created this aperture," I said. "Something designed it." "We didn't say that, and we don't know." "Then what do you think it is? Nature doesn't make a rectangular gravity door." She inhaled sharply. "Nature doesn't make probes like Atlas either." My throat tightened. "Is the government planning anything?" I asked. "Interference? Monitoring? Response?" Her laugh was soft, joyless. "We're not the government." That stopped me cold. I felt air leave my lungs. "Then who are you?" "We're the ones who've been tracking these things long before Atlas arrived." "These things?" I echoed. Another silence. "How many?" I whispered. She didn't answer. I pushed. "How many probes have come through the solar system?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "All we know is that Atlas isn't the first, and definitely not the last." My head rang. "Then what do they want?" She exhaled. "We don't think they want anything from us," she said. "We think the solar system is just on the path." "What path?" "The route, the corridor." She hesitated. "The burn path." My knees almost buckled. Burn this path. The gravitational message wasn't a threat, not a directive, not even a warning. It was a label, a route name, like a highway sign, a cosmic shipping lane. My head spun. "How long has this corridor existed?" I asked. "For longer than we've been looking," she said. "Then why now?" I whispered. "Because something changed," she said. "Something on the far side is different." "What changed?" "We don't know." A flash of movement on the monitor caught my eye. Atlas's trajectory, shifting, tilting. I leaned in. "It's correcting again," I whispered. The gravity corridor bending was almost beautiful, like watching fabric pulled into shape by invisible hands. Atlas's path curved, then recurved, threading itself through clusters of objects with impossible precision. It was dancing through the belt, responding to gravitational cues we didn't even have the mathematics to describe. "Do you see the harmonics?" she asked. I did, and my stomach dropped. Every time Atlas approached an object, the aperture pulsed. Every time it passed by, the stabilizing plane flickered. And the object, the asteroid, the rock, the drifting stone, reacted. Not violently, not explosively, but subtly. Spins altered, trajectories nudged, mass distribution shifted, as if Atlas was leaving fingerprints. "What are those imprints?" I asked. "We don't know," she said. "We've never gotten this close to a live event before." That doesn't sound comforting. It isn't. A new alert jutted across the display. Gravitational wake pattern detected. Type, recursive. Source, Atlas internal core. I stared. "What does recursive mean in this context?" I asked. She inhaled. "It means Atlas is writing something." I felt my grip tighten on the edge of the desk. "Writing what?" "Field structures," she said, "like equations made of gravity instead of symbols." "Instructions?" I whispered. "Or a record? Or a handshake? We're not sure." The idea that this thing was encoding information into space itself made the world tilt slightly, like gravity in the lab had weakened. Then the DSMLA alarm shrieked. I slammed my hand onto the console. "What is it now?" A new window burst open. Real-time imagery, curvature mapping, mass lensing distortions. But one thing towered above all the noise. The aperture is expanding too fast. I read the numbers. "It's growing exponentially," I whispered. "Faster than we modeled," she said. The aperture had jumped from 60 kilometers to 140, then 200, then 300. "Why is it expanding?" I asked. Her voice cracked. "Because Atlas is almost there." And then, without warning, the entire asteroid field responded. Dust plumes lifted, trajectories bent, dozens of rocks oscillated as gravitational pulses rippled through them. It was like a field of tuning forks vibrating to a frequency no one had ever heard before. I watched, heart racing, as the aperture shadow rippled across the cluster. "What is this?" I whispered. "A preparation event, or a stilling, or a clearing." "For what?" "For Atlas to pass through without resistance." "But it can already pass through matter," I said. "Yes," she replied, "but the aperture can't." I froze. "What do you mean?" She inhaled sharply. "The aperture isn't like Atlas. It can't phase through matter the same way." "So?" she whispered. "So if debris is in the way, it breaks." My blood chilled. "Breaks how?" she said. "With force. A lot of it." I stared at the curvature map. A single asteroid in the path, B81 Sylvan, began to rotate rapidly, faster than its structural integrity could handle. First a spin, then a crack, then a collapse. The asteroid disintegrated into a cloud of dust and shards. "Oh God," I whispered, "it's clearing a lane." "Yes," she said, "it's burning its path." Burn this path. The words hit like a physical blow. Atlas wasn't burning anything. The aperture was. Everything in its way. Everything between it and whatever existed beyond. I felt my legs weaken. "What happens when the aperture reaches full size?" I asked. "We don't know," she said again, voice thin. "We've never been this close." "How long?" Silence. "How long?" I repeated. She exhaled. 40 minutes. My pulse hammered. 40 minutes until what? Until the aperture stabilizes and Atlas reaches it. A cold nausea crept through my chest. "And if we lose observation during the crossing?" "We will," she said. "Everything will go dark."
Same as the first time. The first time? I said sharply. You said, "We tracked Atlas emerging near Proxima," she whispered. "We never saw it enter." My stomach flipped. You're saying it came from an aperture we didn't detect? Yes. A new alert shrieked across the screen. I nearly jumped out of my skin. Atlas internal mass shift, shadow core full expansion mode, geometry unstable. The shadow inside Atlas, the geometric void, was unfolding rapidly now, like origami in reverse, layers peeling open into complex, interlocking planes. "What's happening to it?" I asked. "It's preparing for transit." "Transit into what?" Her silence was deafening. I zoomed in. The core expanded again, then again. Then it happened. Another gravitational message. Not encoded, not hidden. 3 new words. Stay behind us. I stumbled back. My heart pounded so violently I thought I might pass out. It's communicating, I breathed. It's warning, she said. Warning us about what? She inhaled. The crossing, she said. Whatever's on the other side. I stared at the screen, at the aperture, at Atlas, at the geometric mass that had unfolded into an impossible lattice. What could be beyond it that requires a warning? Her voice trembled. We believe it leads into a region where gravitational stability breaks down. Breaks down how? Space may not follow the same curvature rules, she said. Tidal forces could be lethal, light might warp, time could dilate unpredictably. And Atlas can survive that? Yes. And we can't? No. I grabbed the desk to keep from collapsing. So, this is how it travels? I whispered. Yes, she said. This is how it moves between stars. Not using propulsion, not using engines, not using wormholes. Using apertures, gravitational windows, cosmic doors punched through weak points in curvature. But then, a darker realization dawned. Is it alone? I whispered. Her silence was the confirmation I didn't want. How many will follow? We don't know, she said. How soon? We don't know. What is their purpose? We don't know. Shadows rippled across the curvature map as Atlas began its final alignment. The aperture stabilized into a perfect vertical seam, humming with the resonance of a universe not our own. There were no final alerts, no new anomalies, no errors, just the quiet tightening of the universe before something irreversible happens. And in that silence, the last gravitational message came through, faint, almost illegible before the sensors overloaded. Not a warning, not a command, a statement. We cannot change course. The aperture flared white. Atlas reached the threshold, and everything went black. Understood. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until the entire building seemed to exhale with me. Atlas had passed through the final corridor. The belt had stabilized. The gravitational storm had collapsed. The aperture, if that's even what it was, had folded into itself like cloth caught in a fist. Silence. For the first time in 26 hours, the QGI room felt normal. Or it would have, if not for the fact that all of us in that room had just watched a half-mile interstellar object slip through an impossible threshold, like a needle threading itself through space-time. My console still glowed with the last telemetry packet, an incomplete, corrupted waterfall of numbers and harmonic spikes. It wasn't a transmission from Atlas. Not exactly. More like an imprint, a residue, something the object left behind as it crossed whatever boundary it had been aiming for. Dr. Rivas sat slumped against the cold wall, staring at the feed with an expression caught somewhere between awe and exhaustion. Is that it? Is it over? I didn't answer her. I couldn't, because even though the corridor had collapsed, even though the gravitational disturbances were flatlining, even though Calderwood's secure line had gone dead minutes earlier, the QGI monitor kept pinging one last active thread. Event trace. Persistent harmonic signature. Source. Unknown. Frequency. 219.1 Hertz. Character. Non-Earth-like. Modulation. The signature followed no thermal pattern, no mass distribution, no rotational cycle. It wasn't a signal being sent. It was a signal being reflected. A kind of echo. But an echo of what? I leaned in, adjusted the spectral analyzer, and isolated the surviving thread. The waveform pulsed on the screen in smooth, breath-like intervals. Rivas swallowed. Is it still alive in there? No, I said quietly. This isn't Atlas. Then what? Shh. Because the waveform was stabilizing, flattening, then sharpening into something I recognized from earlier, something I prayed I was wrong about. A rhythm. Not random, not noise. A geometry. 7 peaks, 3 troughs. 7 peaks, 3 troughs. 7 peaks, 3 troughs. The same structure we'd seen inside Atlas. The same internal oscillation, repeating. But not from Atlas. From the corridor. The corridor itself had memory. Something about that realization made the room feel suddenly smaller. Run it through temporal inversion, I said. Calderwood hesitated. Why? It's harmonic residue. It'll just smear. Do it. She keyed in the command. The waveform inverted. And the breath left her body in a sound somewhere between a gasp and a laugh, because the inverted harmonic didn't smear. It formed structure. Lattice-like, gridded, symmetrical, a pattern like a blueprint or a floor plan, only more dimensional, curling inward and outward at the same time. What is that? She whispered. I stared at it. My throat tightened. It's a map. Of what? I opened my mouth, closed it, tried again. Of here. Her face went pale. Here as in this room? No, here as in our solar system. But why would Atlas leave a map behind? And why backwards? That's the point, I said, voice softening into a dread I hadn't admitted aloud. It didn't leave the map. The corridor did. The corridor? You think it was responsive? To what? To us. No, no, don't do that. Don't make this some kind of I'm not speculating. Look, I pulled up the last 3 hours of telemetry, every wobble, every vibration, every gravitational quiver the QGI had picked up when Atlas approached the corridor. A timeline unfolded on the screen. And 32 minutes before Atlas crossed the threshold, the corridor began to shift. Angles reoriented. Harmonic gradients corrected themselves. Resonance lines stabilized as though anticipating the entry. Not responding to Atlas, preparing for it. Like a docking system adjusting alignment. Like a keyhole aligning itself with an incoming key. Rivas looked like she might be sick. You're saying Atlas didn't find the aperture. The aperture found it. I didn't answer, because answering would mean acknowledging what the data already made obvious. The gravitational corridors were not fixed structures. They weren't natural phenomena. They behaved like state machines, switching, recalibrating, optimizing. And the corridor had begun adjusting the moment we activated the QGI array in its direction. Jesus, Rivas whispered, pressing her hand against her forehead. It wasn't just watching Atlas. No. It was watching us. The department didn't call back. Not right away. Calderwood's last message, if you can call a tone of encrypted static a message, had come through before the corridor collapsed. After that, silence. The lab's secure uplinks froze. The satellite links dropped. Our only connection to the outside world was a bare emergency line that one of the interns insisted we not touch unless the building was literally on fire. And honestly, I wasn't sure we weren't already burning. The map was still on the screen, a perfect geometric representation of our solar system, distorted, folded, but recognizable. Orbital rings, nodal intersections, gravitational wells in curved layers like a topographic chart flipped inside out. But one detail made my stomach turn. There were 2 incoming paths marked on it. 2 trajectories. Not one. One was the path Atlas had taken. The other... "What is that?" Revis whispered. "A second vector. Approaching. Approaching from where?" I zoomed in, stabilized the inverted harmonic pattern. The second trajectory didn't start from interstellar space. It didn't come from beyond the Oort cloud. It didn't even come from beyond the heliosphere. It started inside the solar system. Behind Mars, between Mars and Earth, hidden in the gravitational noise of the sun's interference band. "That's impossible," she said. "There's nothing there. That region's empty unless—" She froze. Unless something had been waiting. The realization hit us both at the same time. The aperture wasn't a date Atlas discovered. It wasn't a one-way corridor at all. It was a junction, a meeting point. And Atlas was not arriving. Atlas was departing. "So, what's coming in?" she whispered. I stared at the map. "It's not coming in," I said slowly. "It's coming back." At exactly 04:18 a.m., the emergency lights flickered, and the intercom crackled to life with a voice I didn't recognize. "This is Director Marcus Klein, Department of Exotransport Phenomena. All personnel remain in place. Seal all external access points. Prepare for full blackout." Revis stiffened. "Exotransport? That's not real. That's not—" "It's real now," I said. The intercom clicked again. "Do not disconnect instrumentation. Do not attempt remote uplink. You are to maintain continuous observation of the harmonic imprint." I stood slowly. "Klein, what are you expecting?" A beat of silence, then another transition. The room felt colder. "When?" I asked. His voice was steady. Too steady. "Now." The QGI array screamed. Not literally, but the data feed surged into saturation spike so sharp the speakers rattled. The harmonic signature, Atlas's echo, rose from 219.1 Hz to 240, then 260, then 300, and off scale. Revis grabbed the console to steady herself. "What's causing that?" "Pressure," I whispered. "Something's pushing against space-time." "You mean—" "Yes." Another aperture was forming, but this one wasn't subtle. It wasn't a graceful fold. It was violent, almost urgent. The space-time curvature on the screen crumpled like foil, bending into a topology that made my eyes water. Impossible angles blooming outward like an opening flower, except flowers don't distort gravitational metrics. Something pressed against the boundary, trying to get through, trying hard. Revis clutched her headset. "We're getting an inbound signature. What the hell?" "What is it?" I demanded. She swallowed. "It matches Atlas." I stared at her. "That's impossible. Atlas just left." "No," she said, shaking her head. "Not Atlas. Something with the same internal geometry, the same harmonic signature, but the mass is different." "How different?" Her eyes met mine, and in those eyes I saw something primal. Bigger. The lab lights dimmed. The aperture stabilized, if you can call something that unstable, stable, and a gravitational wave rippled outward, knocking a stack of printouts to the ground. Then QGI rendered an outline, and the outline made my blood ice. Atlas had been spherical, irregular, comet-like. This object wasn't. It was something else, something structured,
something composed of straight lines and angles. A lattice? A frame? A scaffold? But most alarmingly of all, it wasn't moving like a natural object. It wasn't tumbling. It wasn't drifting. It was aligning. Aligning with the corridor. Aligning with us. "Is it coming through?" Rivas breathed. I checked the curve. No, it's holding position. The aperture pulsed once, twice. Then the object emitted something. A harmonic burst, short, sharp, targeted. At us. Not at Earth, not at the Sun, not at the solar system. At us. The QGI array interpreted it instantly. And the pattern wasn't noise. It was the same structure Atlas had imprinted into the corridor 6 hours earlier, only now resolved, sharpened, completed. 7 peaks, 3 troughs. 7, 3. 7, 3. I froze. "What?" Rivas whispered. "What do those numbers mean?" I didn't answer, because I had already realized something that made my hands go numb. 7-3 wasn't a message. It wasn't a code. It was a location. More specifically, it was our location, the lab's location. Our QGI array emitted harmonic interference cycles in groups of 7 and reboots every 3. The object wasn't communicating. It was identifying us, not just as observers, but as part of the system. As if Atlas, the corridor, the object on the other side, they all used the same rule. Observe something long enough, and you become part of the computation. A chill spread through my spine. "Rivas," I whispered, "we didn't just watch Atlas." She turned to me slowly. "We activated the junction." The aperture pulsed again. A harmonic wave surged through the lab. The outline of the inbound object shimmered, once, twice. And then it did something I will never forget. It rotated. Not physically, not spatially. It rotated in a dimension we couldn't map. The outline twisted inward, like turning a shape inside out, and the QGI array translated the distortion into something horrifying. A diagram of Atlas, of the belt, of our solar system, of us. And then, overlaid on top, a second diagram, not of where Atlas had been, but of where Atlas had gone. The other side of the corridor, the region beyond the aperture, a place that didn't obey our physics, a place where harmonic geometry wasn't an anomaly. It was structure, the foundation, the rule book. I felt my breath stutter. "That's not a map," Rivas whispered. It's, I said, "instructions." "For what?" The aperture flexed. The inbound object brightened at the edges. For how to build another one. The realization hit like an avalanche. Atlas wasn't a scout. It wasn't a messenger. It wasn't even a probe. It was a key to a doorway not meant for objects, but for civilizations. Our QGI array pinged the corridor. The corridor aligned. Atlas crossed. The far side responded. Now the inbound object wasn't approaching. It was teaching. The intercom burst alive with Klein's voice. "Shut it down. Shut everything down now." Rivas flinched. "We can't. If we power cycle while the aperture is active, do it!" I hesitated, because the object wasn't attacking. It was offering something. A blueprint, a translation, a transformation. And in that hesitation, those few seconds where I considered letting the aperture finish whatever it was doing, I realized something that made my mouth go dry. The inbound object wasn't completing its diagram for our benefit. It was completing it because we had already passed a threshold. We weren't observers anymore. We weren't studying the aperture. We were inside the aperture's system. Everything we had done, the scans, the pings, the resonance sweeps, had been interpreted as input. We had triggered the next stage. The object's outline brightened, geometry sharpening, harmonics aligning, the diagram resolving the final symbol. And when I saw that final symbol, everything in my body turned to ice. Because it wasn't a destination. It wasn't a star. It wasn't a frequency. It was a timeline, a countdown. The aperture pulsed, and the building shook. Lights died. The QGI array overloaded. The harmonic map burned white. And the last thing I saw before everything went black was the number 73. 0000. 73 hours. Not until something arrived, but until something opened. Not there. Here. When power returned, the aperture was gone. The corridor was gone. The inbound object was gone. But the countdown remained. Flashing on every darkened screen, burned into every backup drive, encoded into our local quantum cache. 73 hours. If you're listening to this, you already know what that means. Not an arrival, a synchronization, not a warning, a schedule, not a threat,